Hello, this is Dr. R. Narasimhan, and I think my introduction is I'm with Apollo Hospitals, Chennai for the past 30 odd years and heading the bronchial thermoplasty and endobronchial ultrasound services, and also the chairman of the Respiratory Research Foundation of India. My talk today is going to be on an important procedure for a pulmonologist, bronchoscopy, the bread and butter of the pulmonologists and the chest physicians across the world. I'm never tired of telling that if one has to be an excellent pulmonologist, one has to be a good bronchoscopist. If you don't know the bronchoscopy, if you don't know your way through the tracheobronchial tree, and if you don't know how to handle the bronchoscopy, because most of the procedures, whether it be an endobronchial ultrasound, or whether it is a pleuroscopy, or whether it is a cryobiopsy, and whatever bronchial thermoplasty, everything depends on how good a bronchoscopist you are. So, keeping that in mind, I thought I would share some of my thoughts on the bronchoscopy. So, how does it help the pulmonologist? Bronchoscopy allows direct visualization of the airways. There are two kinds of instruments. One is a rigid bronchoscopy, other is a flexible bronchoscopy. It helps us in knowing the airway anatomy. Many times you'll be surprised to see that there are certain congenital abnormalities which you will pick up while doing the bronchoscopy, which you may not be able to pick up on your routine clinical examination, sometimes on the chest X-ray and sometimes on the CT scan of the chest. And most importantly, you can use the bronchoscope for airway sampling. When you are stuck, when you don't know what's causing the problem, you want to know what's the diagnosis or etiology. You can use the bronchoscope to diagnose. They always say there is nothing that this bronchoscope cannot do. It can diagnose, it can treat. It's a therapeutic tool too. When there is a block, especially in pediatrics, when you find a mucus plug blocking or a foreign body blocking the airway, you can take your bronchoscope down there and remove the foreign body and make the patient feel better. It's very gratifying. Patient will be extremely happy once you remove the foreign body and you can see the happiness and pleasure on their face. And it's also a research tool. See, for example, some illnesses, when you do the procedures, there are many occasions where the bronchial lavages have been stored and deep frozen to identify bugs at a later date. Until the 1980s, only rigid instruments were widely used. Multiple generations of adult and pediatric flexible bronchoscopes are available now. They are widely used in adult and pediatric pulmonary medicine. The rigid bronchoscopy is generally performed by ENT and the thoracic surgeons. But nowadays, many pulmonologists have started doing the rigid bronchoscopy because for a cryobiopsy, for a good cryobiopsy, you need to be a good rigid bronchoscopist because you need to know that rigid bronchoscope has to be kept inside and put a Fogarty's catheter inside and put the flexible bronchoscope in and take the biopsy. So, it is no longer a procedure done by the ENT surgeons, it is done by the pulmonologists, rigid bronchoscopy. It is procedure oriented. We use it for foreign body removal. We use it for biopsies. We can use it for granuloma and polyp removals. You can use a rigid bronchoscope. You can put your flexible through the rigid bronchoscope and use a laser through that. You can railroad the flexible bronchoscope to the rigid for many purposes. Like for example, when you want to place a stent, you can use the rigid, then put the flexible in and take the stent inside and put at the place where you want to put it directly under the vision. And it is endless. The role of the bronchoscope is the rigid and the flexible together. If you are very good at it, it is extremely useful for the pulmonologist, and you will be a complete pulmonologist if you know the technique very well. And it will be used in future for many surgeries too. It's a rigid bronchoscope. It's a hollow metal tube. It's a glass rod telescope, and the optics is most important. Now the optics have improved. 20 years back, rigid bronchoscope, one has to look through the rigid bronchoscope. Now you have an excellent visibility. The optics have completely changed the way the pulmonologist looks at the tracheobronchial tree, whether it's with the rigid bronchoscope or whether it's with the flexible bronchoscope. These are just to show you how the rigid and the flexible looks like. And the flexible bronchoscope, as I said, can be used to examine from the nose down to the tracheobronchial tree and into the lobar bronchi and segmental bronchi. You can pass through. You can also use a flexible bronchoscope. The advantage is you can use it to the tracheostomy tube too. When you have a patient is on a tracheostomy, you can put the bronchoscope inside through the tracheostomy tube and remove the plugs, secretion for sampling and so many other purposes. There are various kinds available from 2.2 millimeters, 5.9. Now you have a 6.2 millimeter therapeutic channel bronchoscope. You have a narrowband imaging bronchoscope, and the list is endless. As I said, with a video bronchoscope, you have from 2.8 to 6.3 millimeter, a suction channel of 3.2 millimeters, which means it increases your diagnostic yield. It widens your scope of doing the bronchoscopic procedures under the video. This is a pediatric bronchoscope. When flexible bronchoscopy is the best, easiest, safest, most efficient way to obtain the information. And what is the best anesthesia? That's for the bronchoscopy. The best accomplished in the operating room, we do it in the bronchoscopy suite. It may be performed also in ICU setting, or you can do it on the bedside monitoring with a continuous monitoring bedside bronchoscopy we can do. Under light anesthesia, it allows continuous spontaneous breathing. What I generally do is the patient is given a xylocaine spray and then a cricothyroid injection. We use a 2% or a 4% spray and then use the xylocaine injection 2% or 4% and anesthetize the cricothyroid. The cricothyroid is better in the sense when you give the cricothyroid injection, the patient coughs, and with the cough, the carina and the undersurface vocal cord is completely anesthetized, and it helps the patient in anesthetizing the whole tracheobronchial tree. Not only that, when the patient coughs, some of the xylocaine comes onto the vocal cords, it also anesthetizes the upper surface vocal cords also. So within a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes of the time after you give the cricothyroid injection, you have captured the tracheobronchial tree. Then you put your flexible bronchoscope inside. There may not be much of the cough and other problems. You can insert it to the nasal route, which is the commonest route many people adapt, or you can go through the oral, or you can also use the laryngeal mask airway. If you are sedating the patient and giving a short anesthesia like propofol, you can put LMA, or if it's going to be a prolonged procedure, you can use endotracheal tube. For example, doing endobronchial ultrasound, you can use LMA or a endotracheal tube, or a cryobiopsy if you are doing, put an endotracheal tube and use the bronchoscope, or a tracheostomy tube if you are you put it to the tracheostomy tube. And generally, as I said, topical anesthesia and good lubrication, xylocaine jelly you must put and do it. So you must examine all these passages as you are going through the nasal passages, pharynx, larynx, trachea and bronchi before you zero in onto your area of So what is the technique? What are the things that we can do with the bronchoscope? You can do a bronchial washing. The bronchial washing is one where you put the bronchoscope inside. You have a CT scan by your side and look at the CT scan, you know which segment you have to go and wash. You can go and wash and take that wash for testing. Then there is a procedure called bronchoalveolar lavage. The bronchoalveolar lavage is an alveolar sample. What I said first is a bronchial wash from the bronchus you take. The bronchoalveolar lavage, you take the bronchoscope down to the segmental bronchi, lodge it there, instill saline inside about 30 ml or 40 ml and wait for a couple of minutes, and after you wait for a couple of minutes, the sample returns backwards. The first sample is a bronchial sample, and thereafter whatever sample that comes through is alveolar sample, and that alveolar sample can be used for diagnostic purposes. You can also brush the bronchoscope. If you find some visible abnormality in the segmental bronchi, you can brush the bronchoscope and take those brushings for cultures, for bacteriology pack and so on. If you find visible abnormalities, you can take an endobronchial biopsy. You look at the mass lesion there and take a biopsy. Sometimes the tuberculous lymph nodes can come out through the right main bronchus or into the carina. You can see the lymph node jutting into that. You can put your forceps inside and take the biopsies and give the patient a diagnosis. And you can also do a transbronchoscopic lung biopsy, wherein the bronchoscope is passed through the segmental bronchi and then into the lung parenchyma, go close to the pleura, open your forceps, catch the bronchoscope, see if the patient is wincing with pain. If he is wincing with pain, reopen the forceps, slightly withdraw backwards and take the bite. But nowadays with the advent of the cryobiopsy, the role of transbronchoscopic lung biopsy is slowly growing into oblivion. Many people may stop using the transbronchoscopic lung biopsy because the yield is not as much as you get in cryobiopsy, and the side effects like pneumothorax and other things are a nuisance because you have more of side effects than of a yield. That's very important for you in giving you a diagnosis. You can also use it for laser purposes. Nowadays I use it for cryobiopsies, I use it for a stent placement, I use it for a foreign body removal, I use it for sometimes for a transbronchoscopic needle biopsies. I do EBUS through this procedure. I can also do a cryobiopsy through this. It is endless, as we said. The horizon is widening for a bronchoscope. If you are a good bronchoscopist, you keep on adding and keep widening your thing. So I already mentioned about how I do the bronchial lavage. What you can do on your ball is you can send this bronchial lavage for bacterial, viral, fungal, AFB, special techniques. Nowadays we also send for viral markers. You can do a 21 viral mark. You can also do a 21 bacteriology pulmonary mark. So once you have the sample with you, you can do a lot of things with your samples and get the diagnosis. That's what we are actually doing. Gone are the days when you go for a empirical treatment of bacterial pneumonia. You try to arrive at a cause by giving the patient a diagnosis, by doing interventions that are safe and that give you the diagnosis. And also you can send for a pathological count, cell count, differentials, and special strains you can ask for, like for a PCP. If you suspect, you can ask for a GMS staining or a PAS staining. You can ask for antibody tests you can do, and you can also ask for a PCR. Nowadays we ask for gene expert on our bronchial samples. Ask for some special stainings, lipid staining you can ask. If you suspect a fat embolism, you take the allular bronchial lavage and send them for a fat staining. Or if you suspect allular hemorrhage, you can ask for a hemocytosis staining or allular pretinosis, the periodic staining, or the samples can be examined with electron microscopy. You can look for fungi, you can look for pneumocystis, carinary pneumonia, and as I said, the list is endless. So what are the specific indicators? When you have an atelectasis, collapse, right upper lobe, right lower lobe, child, do a bronchoscopy. Recurrent pneumonia, chronic cough, persistent unexplained wheeze. Sometimes there may be a foreign body inside, or it may be a bronchial adenoma sitting inside causing a bronchial occlusion that may cause a unilateral unexplained wheeze, or a bronchial mass, lung mass, causing an unexplained wheeze. Hemoptysis, suspected airway compression or obstruction, stridor, upper airway obstruction, suspected aspiration, evaluation of tracheostomy. All these things we must do a bronchoscopy and find out. Let me give you some case histories. We had a 54-year-old male from Chennai presenting with a dry cough with very scanty sputum, breathlessness of 1 month, fever intermittent, 15 days, hemoptysis. He had one episode 10 days ago. He was admitted to a hospital and treated with antibiotics and bronchodilators. Personal history: he is an auto driver by occupation. He is a chronic heavy smoker, 1 cigarette, 2 packets of cigarette, 30 years of history. He is an alcoholic, consumes alcohol twice a week, never suffered from any major illness. Family history: has 2 children suffering from asthma, mother suffered from asthma, strong family history of malignancy, mother suffered from TB. On examination, he was febrile, no clubbing, no lymphadenopathy, emphysema at chest, wheeze and crackles with right intrascapular regions. You can see the right lower lobe lesion there. You can see it clearly there. So, what are the possibilities in this patient? It's a non-dissolving pneumonia. Could be either TB or fungal, or it could be a COPD because he has emphysema with a persistent infection, or it could be malignancy, or it could be a malignancy with endobronchial occlusion. So what is the next line of approach? So sputum for AB, culture sensitivity, malignant cells. You can do a HRCT scan of the chest. You can do a bronchoscopy. I always say one should never stop with HRCT scan of the chest because you get an image. Sputum sometimes may be useful. You get only in 40 to 50% of patients only as positive results, whereas in CT scan of the chest you may get an image. Image will only tell you where the lesion is, what the lesion looks like. Tissue is the issue. You need to get a tissue to make a diagnosis, a definitive diagnosis, and for that bronchoscopy is the best tool. You can also do an FNAC of the lung, but the yield may be less. You may get a couple of cells, but it might tell you if it is malignancy, you might give some diagnosis. But if you want to go for other special settings and things, FNAC may not be of a good use. Open lung biopsy, yes, but it is a very big procedure. It entitles hospital stay, cost, side effects, and so on. So this is what we actually did in this patient. So the histopathology came as adenocarcinoma. So this patient was referred to a medical oncologist, and who took him up and treated him for a thing. So we have another patient who is a 60-year-old, presented to cardiology with a history of chest pain, retrosternal persistent, ECG and echo normal, has been having hemoptysis for 15 days. So what we actually did in this patient was, so what are the symptoms that one should be worried about? Any cough of more than 3 weeks, any history of hemoptysis in a smoker, asthma with hemoptysis. So especially hemoptysis, if one has, is mandated to do a bronchoscopy and see from where the bleeding is, so that you can plan for a bronchial artery embolization, or identify the site of bleeding, or identify what is causing the bleeding and give him some cure for the persistent chest pain in a smoker, non-dissolving pneumonias, dysphagia with hemoptysis, unexplained breathlessness in a smoker. Thank you very much for your patient attention.